Keep tight formation. Weapons free.
The morning fog curled around the iron gates of Fort Rainier, a base known for two things: brutal discipline and secrecy. Recruits called it the Silent Fortress. No one asked questions here. You simply followed orders, no matter how strange they were. At 600 hours, the guards took their positions, stretching, yawning, and sipping terrible coffee from metal cups. The base was expecting a high-level arrival, but no one knew who. Rumors spread through the barracks all night. Some Pentagon suit is coming. No, it's an intel officer. Maybe it's the new training evaluator. They were all wrong. A mysterious figure approaches. At exactly 6:17, footsteps approached the gate, a steady, calm beat against the concrete. Out of the mist appeared a woman in a standard-issue uniform. No ribbons, no badges, no rank on her chest, just a duffel slung over her shoulder and a look in her eyes like she had already survived a dozen wars. Captain Marcus Hill, the officer in charge of the gate detail, lowered his clipboard. "Identification, please," he said, not unkindly, but with the authority of a man who believed he knew everything happening on his base. The woman stopped just a few inches from the gate. She didn't search her pockets. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him with a calmness that made Marcus strangely uneasy. Before he could ask again, a young private named Parker stepped forward, brash, impatient, and already irritated because he had pulled gate duty again. "Hey," he barked. "Can't you hear? Show your ID. Civilians don't walk around here." The woman still said nothing. Parker rolled his eyes and shoved her shoulder, trying to push her away from the gate. And that's when Captain Hill felt it. A shift in the air. The woman didn't stumble. She didn't lose balance. She simply pivoted, fluid and precise, catching her duffel before it even moved an inch, like she had rehearsed that movement 1,000 times. Hill realized instantly, this was no civilian. This was someone dangerous and controlled. Her name means nothing, yet everything. The woman finally reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black case. Not the standard military ID, no. This one was matte black, with a gold emblem on the corner that even Hill had only seen twice in his 20 years of service. She handed it to him calmly. Hill's heart dropped into his stomach as he opened it. The private noticed the sudden change in Hill's posture. "What? Who is she?" Hill swallowed hard. It wasn't just military identification. It was a Tier 1 clearance dossier, the kind only carried by operatives whose missions were so classified they didn't have ranks publicly displayed. But what terrified Hill wasn't the clearance level. It was the name. Lieutenant Colonel Aria Dalton. A ghost story whispered across special operations. A name that appeared only in after-action reports that were 90% blacked out. A commander known only by her code name, Spectre. Hill straightened so fast he nearly dropped the ID. Private Parker stared, confused. "Sir, who is she?" Hill didn't answer. Instead, he snapped to attention. "Ma'am, welcome to Fort Rainier." Aria nodded once, her expression unreadable. She wasn't here for a visit. Hill stepped aside, motioning for the gates to open, but Aria paused, turning her head just slightly, just enough to signal she had something to say. Her voice, when it finally came, was controlled and low. "I'm not here for inspection. I'm here for my team." Hill frowned. Your team, ma'am?" Aria's eyes hardened. "The Shadow Unit. They're being stationed here starting today. I expect a briefing room ready in 15 minutes. Hill felt the blood drain from his face. Everyone in Special Operations had heard rumors of the Shadow Unit, a group of elite operatives used for missions the government would never acknowledge. Operatives who were ghosts outside the wire and monsters inside it. No one knew who led them, until now. Parker, still unaware of the situation, nervously muttered, "Shadow Unit. That sounds like some kind of sci-fi name." Aria finally looked at him, really looked at him. It was not anger, not annoyance, but the expression of someone who had already measured him, judged him, and filed him away as irrelevant. "You shoved me," she said quietly. Parker froze. I didn't know." "You always should know. Out there, not knowing gets people killed." Parker swallowed hard, shame burning on his face. But Aria wasn't done. Without raising her voice, she turned to Hill. "As of this moment, gate security protocols are officially under my command. Anyone who fails them will answer directly to me." Hill nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am." The base begins whispering. As Aria walked past the gates, soldiers across the courtyard turned their heads. They didn't know who she was, but they felt something, an aura of control, calculation, and power. Some whispered, some stared, some stepped out of her way. Within 30 seconds, the entire base knew someone important had arrived. Someone dangerous. Someone who moved like she carried a dozen secrets and had survived each one. And yet, no one knew the truth. Aria Dalton wasn't just a commander. She was here because something had gone terribly wrong, something even Hill wasn't cleared to know. And the Shadow Unit? They weren't arriving for training. They were arriving because a threat had surfaced, one that only Aria and her team were capable of facing. A threat already in the country.
Fort Rainier was a structured place, predictable, disciplined, and almost painfully routine. But the moment Lieutenant Colonel Aria Dalton stepped inside, every corridor felt charged, as if the air itself sensed the shift in power. She didn't walk like someone reporting to a base. She walked like someone who owned it. Captain Marcus Hill followed 2 steps behind her, nervous, confused, and trying his best to mask both. "Ma'am," he finally said, "we weren't informed of your arrival." "You weren't supposed to be," Aria replied. Her voice was calm, almost cold, but not unkind. Just factual, like everything she said had already been stripped of emotion before leaving her mouth. Hill swallowed. He had seen generals, colonels, and special operations commanders, but something about Aria was different. She moved like someone who expected danger, someone who survived danger, someone who was the danger. Inside the base headquarters, they reached a steel door labeled Briefing Room A3, usually reserved for high-level meetings. Aria pushed it open without waiting. Inside, officers stood around a large table covered in mission maps and encrypted files. Most of them didn't even know who they were waiting for. They assumed it was a diplomatic observer or a Pentagon analyst. When Aria entered, conversations immediately stopped. Hill cleared his throat. "Attention, Lieutenant Colonel Dalton on deck." The officers stood straighter, some confused, some surprised. A colonel with silver hair and a chest full of medals stepped forward. "Colonel Richmond, I wasn't aware Special Activities Division was sending anyone." Aria didn't shake his hand. "I wasn't sent," she said. "I initiated my own deployment." The room froze. No one initiated their own deployment, not unless they had the authority to do so, unless their clearance outranked half the Pentagon, unless their unit didn't officially exist. "Where is my team?" Aria set her duffel down on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Where is the Shadow Unit?" she asked. Colonel Richmond exchanged a glance with a major. "They haven't arrived yet. We were told they'd land by 0900. Aria checked her watch. It's 08:54. The officers blinked. She said it like she knew exactly when they would step onto the base, even though there had been no communication through normal channels. Hill watched her closely. Everything about Aria felt intentional, like she saw the entire battlefield even when she stood in a conference room. Colonel Richmond cleared his throat. "Ma'am, for clarification, the shadow unit is classified." Aria cut in. "Finish that sentence and you violate security protocol." Richmond stiffened. One thing was now obvious to everyone in the room. Aria Dalton was not someone to question. Attention under the surface. Hill couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on, something Aria wasn't saying out loud. He studied her posture, stoic, unflinching, but her eyes were scanning the room too often, searching corners, checking sightlines, analyzing exits. She wasn't just here to lead a team. She was here because she expected a threat, inside the base, and she expected it soon. The shadow unit arrives. At exactly 0900, the base sirens made a single sharp tone, signaling the arrival of a restricted aircraft. Hill glanced at Aria. She was already moving. "No one enters the hangar except myself and my team," she ordered. The way she said "my team" made Hill's stomach tighten. He followed her out of the building and across the courtyard where soldiers had gathered to watch. Black military trucks rolled toward the runway and a matte gray aircraft, unmarked, taxied into position. Special Force troops stepped out, silhouettes wearing gear that didn't match any division. No patches, no identifiers, just one thing in common. Every single one of them wore a small black armband. Hill whispered to himself, "So the shadow unit is real." Aria reached the bottom of the ramp just as the first operator approached her. He wore a tactical mask pushed up onto his head, revealing sharp eyes and a scar cutting diagonally across his face. "Commander," he said, nodding. Aria returned the nod. "Commander Hawk, good to see you upright." Upright is easy. Staying alive is the challenge. The other operators gathered behind him, each one carrying themselves with the same lethal discipline. They weren't just elite, they were different. Like they'd been handpicked from the best of the best and then sharpened further. Hill had never seen anything like them. The threat revealed. As soon as the team assembled, Aria motioned for them to follow her into a portable command tent. Hill lingered near the entrance. Inside, Aria activated a secured terminal. A classified map appeared, one marked in red. Hawk crossed his arms. "So it's confirmed?" Aria nodded slowly. Hill strained to hear but couldn't get much. Just fragments. Infiltration already underway. Internal sabotage risk. Civilian areas compromised. This base is one of the targets. Hill felt the hairs on his neck rise. This base? Targeted? And then he heard Aria clearly for the first time. "We're dealing with an embedded enemy who knows our tactics, knows our codes, and knows our response times." Hawk leaned forward. "And you think they're already here?" Aria's voice dropped, cold and certain. "I don't think. I know." Hill froze. Someone dangerous? Someone infiltrated? Someone inside the base right now? A sudden alarm. Before Aria could continue the briefing, a sharp alarm ripped across Fort Rainier, one Hill had only heard once before. Soldiers ran in every direction. Hill's eyes widened. "That's impossible. No one can break into the armory without 2 clearance levels." Aria didn't hesitate for even a second. She grabbed her gear bag, slung it over her shoulder, and said to her team, "Shadow unit, move out." Hawk signaled his squad immediately. But then Hill saw something in Aria's expression as she stepped out of the tent. Not surprise, not confusion, but recognition. Like she already knew this was going to happen. Like she had been waiting for it.
Sirens blared across Fort Rainer, red lights spinning wildly as soldiers sprinted across the yard. Orders shouted, radios crackling, alarms overlapping. But even with the noise, one thing stood out. Aria Dalton was completely calm. Her shadow unit fell into formation behind her as she strode toward the armory, fast, determined, not wasting a single breath. Captain Marcus Hill struggled to keep up. "Ma'am," he called out, breathless, "who could possibly breach the armory? It's triple locked, biometrics, key codes, two-man authorization." Aria didn't slow. "That's why I told you there's an infiltrator." Hawk, the shadow unit's second-in-command, glanced back at Hill. "Whoever did this isn't just a spy. They've trained with us, or against us." Hill felt a chill crawl up his spine. The base wasn't under attack from the outside. The threat was inside, moving like a ghost. Approaching the armory. 2 MPs were slumped unconscious at the entrance, alive but knocked out cold. No gunshots, no blood. Hill knelt beside one. Pressure point strike. Fast, clean, professional. Aria glanced at it once and moved on. She already knew. Inside the armory, the overhead lights flickered. A steel locker had been pried open, not ripped by force, but precisely cut through the locking mechanism. The intruder knew exactly where to attack. Hawk bent down in front of the cut metal. Thermal abrasion, military grade. Aria checked the inventory logs on a terminal. Only one item had been taken. A small sealed case marked HMR. Hill swallowed hard. What was stored in that case? The moment he asked, he realized he might not want the answer. Aria turned to him, her eyes sharp. "That case contains a neural targeting module. It can override any drone in a 20-mile radius." Hill stared at him in disbelief. "That means control of our entire surveillance system?" Hawk finished. "Yeah. And every air asset on standby," Aria added. Hill felt his knees weaken. This wasn't just a breach. It was a prelude. Someone was preparing to blind the entire base. The first lead. Aria switched from the inventory terminal to a security feed. Most cameras were static or blacked out. But one camera, near the maintenance corridor, flickered on screen. And in that half-second of footage, a figure in dark tactical gear moved down the hall. Fast, precise, efficient. Hawk squinted. "That walk. I know that walk." Aria didn't respond, but the tension in her jaw tightened. Hill frowned. "Do you recognize him?" Aria exhaled slowly. "It's not a him." Hill blinked. "What?" "It's a woman," Aria said. "Formerly part of our unit." Hawk closed his eyes for a moment. "Commander, tell me you're not saying." But Aria was already walking out. "We move, now." Hill hurried after her. "Ma'am, who was she?" Aria didn't answer for several seconds. Then finally, "Sable." Hill stopped in his tracks. If he knew one name from the classified rumors surrounding the shadow unit, it was hers. A ghost. A rogue elite operative. A myth whispered among soldiers. A woman who once trained beside Aria, and then vanished after the mission in Korath Valley. Through the maintenance halls. The maintenance corridors beneath Fort Rainer were narrow and dimly lit, designed for engineers, not soldiers. Pipes ran along the ceilings, dripping occasionally. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Every sound echoed. Perfect for an infiltrator. Difficult for everyone else.
Aria led the way without hesitation. She moved like she'd memorized every inch of the base before she even arrived. Hill whispered behind her, "How well do you know this, Sable?" Aria's reply was soft, but heavy. "She was my partner." Hill felt the weight of the words, not romantically, though her tone held no sentimentality, but tactically, operationally, professionally. "She trained with me," Aria continued. "She shadowed me. She knew my strategies before I even spoke them." Hawk added grimly, "And then she disappeared after the mission in Korath Valley." Hill had read classified fragments of that mission. Half the files were redacted, the other half were nightmares. "What happened?" he asked. Aria didn't look back. "She died." She paused. "At least, that's what we were told." The first confrontation. The team reached a junction where the corridor split into three. Aria didn't hesitate. "She'll go left. It's the only route to the server access chamber." Hawk frowned. "How can you be sure?" Aria's answer was immediate. "Because it's what I would do." The shadow unit spread out. Hawk took point. Aria stayed in the middle, scanning every shadow. Then, a soft metallic click echoed through the hallway. Hawk raised a fist, signaling a halt. Hill froze. The sound came again. Not footsteps. Not movement. A device activating. Aria whispered, "Tripwire mine. Move back." Before the squad could retreat, a soft female voice drifted through the corridor, amplified through a speaker, distorted slightly, but unmistakable. "Well, Aria, I was wondering how long you would take to catch up." Hill felt the blood drain from his face. "Sable." Aria didn't flinch. "Surrender the module." A soft laugh echoed, calm and confident. "Oh, Commander, you still give orders like I'm part of your unit." Hill leaned in and whispered, "She hacked the intercom system." "Of course she did. She built half of it." Sable's voice continued, "You should have stayed out of this area. This isn't your fight anymore." Aria clenched her jaw. "You made it my fight the second you stepped on this base." A pause. Quiet. A tension that felt like a wire stretched too tight. Then Sable whispered, "Catch me if you can." A loud pop echoed through the hand. A loud pop echoed through the hallway. Smoke burst through the far end of the corridor. The tripwire mine didn't explode outward. It detonated inward, sealing the hallway with a collapsing door. She wasn't trying to kill them. She was slowing them down. Hill yelled, "She's heading for the servers." Aria was already running.
Smoke rolled through the corridor like fog creeping over a battlefield. Red emergency lights pulsed, lighting Aria's face in sharp flashes as she sprinted forward. Behind her, Hawk and the shadow unit followed in tight formation, with Captain Hill struggling to keep pace, adrenaline driving him forward. Ahead of them, Sable was slipping deeper into the base, toward the one place she could blind Fort Rainer completely. The server access chamber. If she reached it first, the entire installation, with over 700 soldiers, would be operating blind. The race through the sublevels. Aria charged through a maintenance hatch, kicking it open. Inside, a narrow catwalk stretched over a chasm of cables, coolant tanks, and electrical conduits. Hawk whispered, "Commander, she's trying to reach the uplink port. If she patches in the module..." Aria replied sharply, "She won't." Captain Hill added, "Ma'am, with all due respect, she's ahead of us." "She won't," Aria repeated, but this time softer, like she was arguing with herself as much as with him, because deep down, she knew the truth. Sable was always 2 steps ahead. The doors. They reached the reinforced steel entrance to the chamber, or rather, what remained of it. The door had been sliced open in a perfect arc. Hill stared at the molten metal. She cut through a 6-inch titanium door in under a minute? Hawk muttered, "Yeah, that's her." Aria stepped through the breach. Inside, the server chamber glowed with a cold blue light, rows upon rows of processors, humming softly like the heart of a machine, and standing in the center, facing a holographic console, was Sable. Dressed in matte black tactical gear, her blonde hair tied in a tight braid, calm, controlled, beautiful in a lethal way, a ghost come back to life. The confrontation. Sable lifted the small classified case and addressed the console. "You're too late." The shadow unit spread out, weapons raised. Sable didn't react. She didn't need to. Aria spoke first. "Sable, turn around." And slowly, she did. Her eyes locked with Aria's, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. Two warriors, forged in the same fire, now separated by decisions neither could undo. Sable tilted her head. "You were always persistent." Aria took one step forward. "You're using a stolen prototype to compromise a US base. Why?" Sable didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed the case gently on the console. Then she spoke quietly. "Because Fort Rainier is being used for something far worse than war." Hill blinked. "What are you talking about?" Sable gestured around the room. "This base isn't just storing weapons. It's developing autonomous strike algorithms, ones that can identify, target, and eliminate without human oversight." Hill's stomach twisted. Aria's voice hardened. "You don't get to decide what's moral, Sable. You don't get to act alone." Sable stepped forward, her expression almost mournful. "And you still believe the system we serve is clean?" Hawk shouted, "Put your hands where we can—" "Enough," Aria commanded. Sable lowered her hands slowly. "You always trusted the chain of command," she said softly, looking at Aria, "even when it broke us." A past revealed. Hill whispered, "Ma'am, what does she mean?" Aria didn't look at him. A memory flickered across her face. Pain, guilt, loss. Sable was nearly killed on the Korath mission because of a failed intelligence update. The command denied responsibility. They labeled her unstable. Sable added coldly, "They made me disappear, erased me." Hill felt cold. He finally understood. She wasn't a villain. She was a soldier abandoned by her own command. The final move. Sable backed toward the console again. Her hand hovered over the uplink port. "Aria, walk away. I don't want to fight you." Aria's voice was steady. "Then don't." A long silence filled the chamber. Sable's eyes softened. "You always believed in me. The only one who tried to protect me." Aria stepped closer. "I still do." For the first time, Sable's expression cracked. She blinked fast, almost like she was fighting tears. Then she looked at the module, then back at Aria. "Tell me this is the right path." Aria shook her head. "It's not," she whispered. "But you still can be." Sable hesitated, the internal war written across her face. Then she lifted the module and tossed it to the ground. Hawk lunged forward and secured it. Hill exhaled with relief. But Sable, she smiled sadly. "You always win, Aria." Aria ran towards her. "Sable, wait!" But Sable tapped a device on her chest. A flash bomb detonated. White, blinding light flooding the chamber. When the light faded, Sable was gone. A vent panel hung open. A rope descended into the maintenance ducts below. She had escaped. Again. Aftermath. Outside, MP secured the base. The alarms ceased, the prototype was recovered. Damage minimal. But Aria stood alone near the loading bay, staring into the distance. Hawk approached. "Commander, we'll find her." Aria shook her head. "No," she whispered. "She doesn't want to be found." Hill stepped forward. "What will you tell command?" Aria looked at him, determination returning to her eyes. "The truth," she said. "For once." Hill saluted her. Not because of her rank, not because she commanded an elite unit, but because of the kind of leader she was. A leader Sable once followed, a leader many still would. And as Aria walked away, Hawk whispered to Hill, "Now do you understand?" Hill nodded. "Yes. She's not just a commander." Hawk finished. "She's the commander. The one even ghosts salute."